It is the dead of night in King's Landing, and the bells will not stop ringing. A queen stands on the roof of Maegor's Holdfast, looking out over her own city, and her city is on fire. The Hill of Rhaenys glows red against the dark. From somewhere below comes a sound no one in the world has ever heard before. The screaming of dragons. She had won this. She had crossed half a war to sit the Iron Throne, buried sons to reach it, and now she stands above a sea of torches and hate, and watches the last of her power burn. Beside her, a boy of 11, her youngest living son, begs to be allowed to fly down and save the beasts in the pit. She forbids it. She is wrong to, but she does not yet know how wrong. Down in the dark, the mob has reached the chains, and before this night is through, the dragons of King's Landing will all be dead, and so will a part of the queen who let them die. Welcome to Westeros Within, where the fires of history still burn. This is House of the Dragon, the true history. Chapter 7. The Fall of King's Landing. This is the story of how Rhaenyra Targaryen won everything she ever wanted, and then watched the city she had bled for rise up and tear it from her hands in a single night of fire. When we left this war, the road to King's Landing lay open. Tumbleton was a smoking ruin behind the Greens, and their host had curdled, leaderless, glutted on plunder. Two low-born dragon riders dreaming of crowns while the great lords met in the dark to plot their murder. The war that began over a throne had become a free-for-all of fire. But to understand the night the city burned, we must go back to the day the throne was finally hers. It was the year 130. Aegon II's defenders had scattered, Aemond gone with Vhagar, Criston Cole marching away to his death in the mud. And so, when Rhaenyra came for the capital, little was left to stop her. Her uncle and husband Daemon flew first, circling the city on the blood-red Caraxes, the bloodworm, the gold cloaks of the city watch, Daemon's own from the days he had commanded them, threw open the gates. Then came Rhaenyra herself, descending on golden Syrax, and the great fleet of the sea snake, Lord Corlys Velaryon, filling Blackwater Bay with sails. The city did not fight. The city knelt. And Rhaenyra Targaryen climbed at last onto the Iron Throne her father had promised her a lifetime ago. There is a story, set down by Septon Eustace, who never loved her, that as she settled onto Aegon the Conqueror's seat of melted swords, the throne cut her. A thin line of blood across her hand and arm. Eustace meant it as an omen, a judgment, that the throne itself rejected her. Believe the omen or not, the blood was real enough, and it would not be the last she shed in that city. For Rhaenyra would hold King's Landing for half a year, and no more. History would give her a bitter name for it. The half-year queen. The triumph went sour almost at once. A conqueror needs gold, and Rhaenyra's coffers were near empty after a year of war. So she turned to her master of coin, Lord Bartimos Celtigar, and the taxes began. New duties at the gates, new levies on the port, burdens that the chronicles tell us rose by the day. The merchants and dockhands and craftsmen who had knelt to welcome her now found her hand in their purses, again and again. And alongside the taxes came the executions. She gave Lord Otto Hightower to the headsman, the old hand of the green, the architect of her enemy's cause. With him died Sir Jasper Wilde, the lawyer they called Ironrod, who had argued so hard for Aegon's claim. That much, even her friends could understand. But then came Lord Rosby and Lord Stokeworth, two lords who had bent to the Greens and now hurried back to bend to her. Rhaenyra would not have them. She named them faithless friends and sent them to the block as well. It was meant to look like strength. It looked like fear. And the small folk of King's Landing, watching the heads rise on the spikes and feeling the taxes bite, began to mutter a name for their new queen. A cruel name. The cruelest they knew. They called her King Maegor with teats. Maegor the Cruel. The tyrant whose reign of terror still poisoned the city's memory 3 generations on. That was the king they now saw in their queen. And the curse born of it in the gutters of Flea Bottom would outlast her by 100 years. The realm's delight had become a thing the realm despised. But hatred alone does not topple a queen who commands dragons. A mob is nothing to a dragon. And so here is the deadly truth at the heart of this chapter. By the autumn of that year, the dragons of King's Landing were slipping away from her, one by one. Her son's great beasts were already gone. Jacaerys, drowned in the gullet. Lucerys, burned over Storm's End. The dragon seeds she had armed at the sowing, her terrible new weapons. 2 of them had turned their cloaks at Tumbleton and burned her own men from the sky. And now, even those closest to her scattered to the winds of the war. Daemon could not rest. The wound that drove him was Aemond One Eye, the prince who had killed his stepson Lucerys, who still ruled the Riverland's sky on ancient Vhagar. So Daemon took the bloodworm and flew, hunting a reckoning the city could not give him. He left, and he did not come back. So count what remained to defend the capital on the night everything came apart. Daemon gone, chasing Aemond toward a fate we will come to. The dragon seeds, defected or dead. 3 young dragons chained in the pit, too small or too unwilling to be war mounts. And 1 great she-dragon, golden Syrax, the queen's own, that Rhaenyra dared not risk in the chaos of her own streets. A queen who had ridden to war on a dragon now sat in a city she could barely hold, and her dragons were either gone or chained, or too precious to fly. Into that brittle silence 2 things fell: a death and a prophet. He had no name. History lost it, or never learned it. We know only what he was: a begging brother of the faith, barefoot, filthy, one-handed. Grand Maester Munchen believed he had lost that hand long ago, to a thief's justice. A broken man, half-mad, who came to the great open space called Cobbler's Square, and began, night after night, to preach. And what he preached was fire. He told the starving, frightened crowds that all their suffering had one source: the dragons. He called them demons, the spawn of godless Valyria, the same black sorcery that had drowned the greatest empire the world had ever known under fire and shadow. The doom of Valyria, he warned, was coming for King's Landing next, so long as the dragons and their masters remained. Only by cleansing the city of dragons, the shepherd cried, could the realm be saved. It should have been the raving of a madman. But the people had watched dragons turn the sky to flame at Rook's Rest, in the Gullet, over the Riverlands, at Tumbleton. They had buried their dead by the 1,000. The madman was telling them their grief had a shape and a name and an enemy they could reach. And they listened. Night by night, the shepherd's followers grew. The histories give a number that beggars belief. His lambs, they say, came to number as many as 10,000. 10,000 desperate souls, packed into Cobbler's Square in the dark, waiting for the word to rise. They needed only a spark, and the doomed, gentle house of the dragon was about to give them one. In a chamber of Maegor's Holdfast, a prisoner had been kept for half a year. Helaena Targaryen, Aegon II's sister and wife. Once a queen herself, and now a captive in the castle her family had ruled. You met her grief long ago in this tale. It was Helaena who was made to choose, on the night of blood and cheese, which of her children would die. Her little son, Jaehaerys, murdered before her eyes. Her boy, Maelor, sent away, and torn apart by a mob at Bitterbridge. Only her daughter Jaehaera remained to her, and under the weight of it all, Helaena's mind had broken. By the end, the histories say, she did not speak, would not eat, and could not sleep. And then, one night, the Dowager Queen Helaena went to the window of her chamber in Maegor's Holdfast, and threw herself from it. She fell upon the iron spikes that ring the dry moat below, and died at once, impaled. She was 21 years old. The chronicles cannot agree on why. Half a year of captivity, a shattered mind, a grief no soul should carry, any of it might have been enough. We will never truly know what was in her thoughts when she stepped to that window. But what happened next did not wait for the truth. Word raced through the city. The beloved Princess Helaena was dead. And on its heels came a darker word, a whisper that hardened into certainty in a single night. She had not jumped. She had been murdered, thrown to the spikes on the orders of Queen Rhaenyra herself. Munkin tells us it was the shepherd who seized upon the tale and spread it, that the queen had sent her brute of a captain, Sir Luther Largent of the Gold Cloaks, to do the deed. Whether there was a grain of truth in it, no one could say. It did not matter. The city believed it, and the city rose. The riot began the night Helaena died, and it began at Cobbler's Square, where the shepherd's 10,000 were already waiting. The crown sent men to break it. Sir Luther Largent himself, the very man the rumor named as Helaena's killer, rode out with 500 gold cloaks to scatter the crowd. 500 against 10,000. In the narrow dark of those streets, it was no contest. The mob swallowed them. Luther Largent was pulled down and killed, and most of his men with him. The rising had its first taste of blood and its first victory, and there was no stopping it after that. The whole city came apart at once. The mob split into rivers of torchlight, and several of those rivers ran toward the same place, the great domed mountain on the Hill of Rhaenys, where the dragons of House Targaryen had slept for 100 years. The Dragonpit. They came to do the thing the prophet had promised, to kill the demons, to cleanse the city in the dragon's own blood. And atop Maegor's Holdfast, Rhaenyra and her sons climbed to the roof and watched the torches climb the far hill toward her chained and helpless dragons. The Dragonpit was a fortress, its bronze doors thick, guarded by the dragon keepers, the ancient order sworn to tend the beasts, men who knew dragons as no others living did. But there were fewer than 50 of them that night, and the mob came in the thousands. The dragon keepers fought. The histories grant them that. Fewer than 50 men, holding the doors against a flood of 10,000. And when the rabble finally broke through, every last one was cut down where he stood. Then the mob poured into the dark of the pit, and the dragons woke. 4 dragons were chained beneath that dome. None could fly. And one by one, in the smoke and the screaming, they died. There was Shrykos, riderless since the murder of little Jaehaerys, a man the songs would remember as Hob the Hewer, a common woodsman, climbed onto her neck and sank his axe between her eyes, blow after blow, until she lay still. There was Morgul, the dragon of the child princess Jaehaera, a knight in burning armor, remembered only as the Burning Knight, led the rush that brought her down. There was Tyrax's, the mount of Rhaenyra's own son, Prince Joffrey Valerian. Chained in his lair, Syrax burned the men who came at him until the entrance was choked with the dead, and no one could climb the wall of corpses. So the shepherd's followers broke through the back of his den instead. And there, tangled in his own chains, unable to turn, Syrax was butchered. And there was Dreamfire, the oldest of them, once ridden by Queen Helaena herself. The dragon, perhaps, who felt her rider's death most of all. A crossbow bolt took Dreamfire in the eye, and half-blind and maddened with pain, she fought as no chained thing should be able to fight. She slew more men that night than the other 3 dragons combined. At the last, in her agony, Dreamfire threw herself upward, into the great dome of the Dragonpit itself. Stone cracked, and then half that vast roof, 100 years old, came down in an avalanche of rubble. It crushed Dreamfire, and it crushed hundreds of her killers with her, burying dragon and dragon slayers together beneath tons of broken stone. But there is a 5th dragon in this tale, and the cruelest death of the night was not a dragon's at all. On the roof of Maegor's Holdfast, watching the pit blaze, Prince Joffrey Valerian could not bear it. His own dragon, Syrax, was dying in there. He begged his mother to let him fly to the fight, and Rhaenyra, terrified of losing him, forbade it. They would need every man, she said, to hold the Red Keep when the rest of the city fell. The boy disobeyed her. He slipped away in the chaos, but not to a dragon of his own. He went to the yard where golden Syrax was kept, his mother's dragon, a beast that had never known another rider. Joffrey climbed onto Syrax's back and loosed her chains, and the great she-dragon took to the burning sky. She would not have him. 200 feet above the rooftops of Flea Bottom, Syrax twisted and bucked against the stranger on her back, and Prince Joffrey Valerian lost his grip and fell. He was Rhaenyra's last living son, by Helaena Targaryen, the last of the 3 princes she had sent into this war. And he died in the dark over the slums of the city, with no one to catch him. And golden Syrax, riderless and panicked above a city that wanted her dead, was dragged down at last and killed in the streets, the queen's own dragon, slain by her own people. 5 dragons died in King's Landing that night. The histories cannot tell us how many men and women died with them. Hundreds, surely. Perhaps thousands. The Hill of Rhaenys burned until dawn. And when the smoke cleared, the dragons of King's Landing, the very symbol of Targaryen power, the thing that had made one family the masters of a continent, were simply gone. By the gray light of morning, the truth was plain to everyone in the Red Keep but the Queen. King's Landing could not be held. Her dragons were dead in the ashes of the pit. Her son Joffrey lay broken in Flea Bottom. Daemon was gone into the Riverlands, chasing a vengeance she could not reach. And out in the smoking square, the shepherd's mob now ruled the city, raising the heads of 5 slain dragons upon posts as their trophies. Rhaenyra Targaryen had taken the Iron Throne, and in winning it, she had lost the city, the people, the dragons, and very nearly everything she was. Her loyal men gathered around her and told her what she did not want to hear, that she must run. And so the half-year queen prepared to flee her own capital, back toward the island fortress where it had all begun, back toward Dragonstone. But Dragonstone would be no sanctuary. For while Rhaenyra fled east across the bay, her husband Daemon was riding his own dark road in the Riverlands, toward a lake called the God's Eye, and a final reckoning in the sky with Aemond One Eye that neither of them would walk away from. The war had become a thing that devoured everyone who reached for it. And it was not finished taking. 2 queens still lived as that terrible year burned toward its end. By the next, both would be dead, and the dance would end not in triumph, but in poison and treachery and the cold justice of the North. That is where we go, in the final chapter, to the dying of the queens, the last battle of the dragons, and the bitter, broken peace that closed the dance forever. I am Westeros within. If these old fires still burn for you, then subscribe and ride with me into the last chapter, for the true history is nearly told, and the end of the Dance of the Dragons is the darkest hour of them all.